My childhood was the kind of story people assume must be exaggerated because no one believes parents can play favorites that openly. But mine did. My older sister, Camilla, was the family treasure. Beautiful, adored, spoiled in ways that bent the entire household around her whims. And me, I was the child who blended into the wallpaper. Camilla had the kind of looks that turned heads everywhere we went. Thick curls, pale green eyes, soft features my mother flaunted like a prize ribbon. I was the darker-haired, darker-eyed contrast that my mother treated like a manufacturing defect. She never said it in those words, but she didn't need to. The comparisons were constant and brutal, especially once we had our teenage years. Lena, why don't you let your sister teach you how to dress? Maybe she can help you look put together for once, my mother would say, standing in the hallway with her arms folded as if my existence were a personal insult. If I ever asked Camilla for help, makeup advice, hair tips, she'd sneer or laugh, usually loud enough for any bystander to hear. "You can't fix a face with eyeliner," she once told me. I never forgot that. We grew up filled with resentment, her weaponizing the pedestal she lived on and me suffocating under it. Our mother molded Camilla into a narcissist and left me to figure out why being quiet, studious, and plain made me unworthy of even basic warmth. That favoritism followed us everywhere. In high school, when Camilla slept with the boy I was dating, despite despising him and calling him ugly anytime he wasn't around, my parents gave her a pass without hesitation. My dad sighed and said, "Let's not make this a big deal." My mom's only comment was, "Camilla made a mistake. Move on." I remember sitting on the bathroom floor that night, replaying my father's blank face. If the man raising you can't defend you, what man ever will? Maybe the only blessing of being the unwanted daughter was that no one cared enough about me to interrupt my studying. While Camilla partied and coasted through school, I poured everything into my grades. By the end of senior year, I had a 4.0 and a full scholarship to Crestwood University. I can still picture the exact moment I rushed home to tell my parents. I was shaking with excitement, finally having something that belonged only to me. But when I told them, my dad said a flat, "Good job," without looking away from the TV. My mom didn't even raise her eyes from her phone. Later, she ignored me completely, refusing to speak to me for a week, as if my scholarship offended her. That night, I learned the truth. Some parents don't want to see their children succeed equally. Some want one child to shine and the other to stay in the shadows. And I was done begging for a place in their light. I journaled until sunrise, deciding I'd turn all my pain into drive. If my family wasn't going to give me love, I'd give myself everything they couldn't. Stability, success, independence. Even if I had to earn it all alone. And I did. I graduated with honors, landed an internship that became a permanent position at Brightwave Analytics, and by 23, I was making more money than my parents had ever imagined possible. I bought a house in Brookhaven, Colorado, kept my circle small, and focused on building a life far away from the chaos I grew up in. But success didn't change how my family treated me. At holiday gatherings, my extended relatives would congratulate me. My parents? Never. My mother would hijack conversations the moment anyone asked me a question. One Christmas, when my uncle brought up a new promotion I'd earned, she muttered under her breath, "It's probably exaggerated anyway." When I finally bought my first home and posted it online, every family member liked the post, except her. Meanwhile, Camilla's life was a train wreck. She failed out of college, got pregnant by a boyfriend she barely knew, then tried fixing their failing relationship by having another baby. She threw up to holidays loud, vindictive, and ready to insult me the moment she saw me. "Look at you, Lena, sipping some stuck-up bitch again." Her kids would stand right there as she cursed at me. Two quiet little boys, Evan and Miles, with big eyes and small voices, absorbing their mother's venom the way I once had. I never really knew my nephews. Every time I tried, Camilla got in the way with snide remarks or cold shoulders. Still, the boys were polite and gentle in ways that didn't match the household they were raised in. If anything, their sweetness made Camilla's cruelties stand out more. I had no idea how deeply I'd come to love those boys, or how violently our lives would collide. It began one Saturday morning. I had just finished a hellish work week and was sipping coffee in my quiet home when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Evan and Miles stood on my porch holding overnight bags. their faces confused and hopeful. Evan said softly, "Aunt Lena, Mom said you're watching us for 8 weeks. She's going on a trip." 8 weeks. Camilla hadn't even bothered to come herself. I immediately brought the boys inside before they froze on the porch and started calling Camilla. 10 calls ignored. 11. 12. Finally, she answered, voice cold and dripping with entitlement. I told her this was unacceptable, that she needed to come get her children or I would call CPS. Her response was a threat, so sharp it took the air out of my lungs. "If you call CPS, I'll call your job and tell you you're not taking your bipolar meds. I'll get you fired." I don't have bipolar disorder. She knew that. But my career was everything. She knew that too. I hung up shaking. I called my mother next, stupidly hopeful she'd care about her grandson's safety. She didn't. She said, "They're old enough to walk to your house. Camilla has always helped you be there for her for once." I snapped. Years of screaming buried in my throat came out in one explosion. I told her to name one time Camilla had done anything for me. She couldn't. She just repeated that I owed my sister. I asked her to come to my house so I could at least leave the boys with someone if Camilla refused to return. My mother reluctantly drove over, and when she arrived, she looked at me with the same scorn she had my whole life. What she told me next changed everything. Camilla wasn't on vacation. She was being flown overseas by a sugar daddy. Something in me snapped. I told my mother the truth. Camilla was a disaster of a parent, and she'd left her children to chase money. In my mother, she finally dropped her mask long enough to spit out the line that haunted me. "You were born ugly, Lena, and you'll die ugly too." When I told her to leave, she shoved me so hard, I crashed into my coffee table, breaking the vase my boyfriend Callum had bought me on his last visit from Australia. I screamed at her to get out before I called the police. She refused, shouting that Camilla was right about me. Eventually, I forced her out. And when the door closed, I collapsed on the floor and sobbed so loudly my nephews peeked out, eyes wide and scared. They asked me if I was okay. No one had ever asked me with such genuine concern in my entire childhood. I pulled myself together, ordered food, put on movies, and let them relax while I tried to breathe for the first time that day. After my mother finally left, the house felt like a battlefield gone quiet. I checked on the boys again. They were curled on the couch under a blanket watching a movie. Evan gave me a small, hopeful smile. Miles clutched his little stuffed dog, tapping its worn paw against his chin. I didn't know these kids well, but something inside me felt protective in a way I'd never experienced. Maybe because I recognized their confusion, their fear, the way they were trying not to be a burden. It looked too much like the girl I used to be. I was still shaking when I went upstairs to call Callum, my boyfriend across the world. I hadn't had a chance to explain what was happening yet. When he picked up, I barely got a sentence out before the tears came. I told him everything: Camilla's threats, my mother's cruelty, the boys being abandoned on my doorstep, the risk to my job, the fear that everything I'd built could collapse because of my sister's selfishness. Callum listened the way only he could, calm, steady, grounding. Then he said the words that would change the direction of this entire disaster. "Lena, what she's doing is illegal on multiple levels. You need evidence. Get her to repeat the threat and record it." I froze. Part of me was afraid, another part recognized the brilliance in his suggestion. He was right. Camilla would try to ruin my career if she felt cornered. I needed something to protect myself. After we talked, I went back downstairs to be with Evan and Miles. I didn't want them to feel unwanted, not even for a second. They were quiet at first, nervous about bothering me, but when I handed them controllers and joined their video games, something shifted. They laughed, they relaxed, they teased me lately when I absolutely destroyed a level they'd been stuck on. For a moment, the house felt warm. Later, I noticed their socks had holes, their clothes were too small, the bags they brought were filled with outfits they'd clearly outgrown. My heart clenched. They weren't just neglected emotionally, they were neglected physically. So the next morning, I took them to Maple Ridge Center, the nearest mall. I told them they could pick out whatever they liked. For the first time, I saw what they looked like when they were allowed to be children. Racing between stores, pointing at shirts, smiling so big their cheeks looked sore. I kept buying things, I couldn't stop. New clothes, shoes, jackets that fit, pajamas, a plush toy for Miles, a science kit Evan begged for, snacks, stickers, toothbrushes. Then I bought each of them a Nintendo Switch.
That was the moment everything changed. Evan froze, eyes wide, and whispered, Is this really ours? Miles burst into tears, clutching the box like someone might take it away. On the drive home, Evan wiped at his face and asked in a trembling voice, Aunt Lena, why are you being so nice to us? We don't deserve all this. I nearly had to pull over. You deserve kindness, I told him, because you're kids, and you're my boys too. He cried harder. Then he whispered, I'm mad at Mom for keeping us away from you. My throat closed up. I reached back and squeezed his hand. When we returned home, I cooked dinner, and the boys played on their new consoles until they fell asleep on the couch, peaceful for once. I tucked them into the guest room, kissed both of their foreheads, and went to my bedroom to do what I had to do. I called Camilla again, this time with my phone recording. She answered sounding irritated and strained, like she'd been partying or worse. The moment I mentioned CPS, she snapped. I'll tell your boss you're off your meds. I'll tell him you're unstable and dangerous. Nobody will trust a crazy bitch like you in that office. I felt my blood run cold, but my voice stayed calm. You'd lie to my employer? I don't care if it's true or not. I'll say whatever I want. You're nothing without that stupid job. She kept ranting, repeating the same venomous phrases, crazy, sick, undeserving. I let her talk until I had everything recorded. When I finally hung up, my hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. But I had what I needed. The next morning, before the boys woke up, I called CPS and reported everything. Her abandonment, the threats, the coercion, the recording. The agent listened to the audio and immediately escalated the case. Thank you, he said. We'll begin an investigation today. My heart raced. But for the first time, I felt like someone outside my tiny world finally believed me. I spent the rest of the day with the boys, movies, playing in the yard, making lunch together. I was starting to feel comfortable with them, even protective, which made it hurt even worse knowing the situation could explode at any moment. My mother called the next day. I don't know why I answered. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I wanted her to finally choose me for once. But when we spoke, we fell right back into the same tired pattern. The moment she heard I'd called CPS, she hung up on me, undoubtedly to warn Camilla. I barely slept that night. I felt sick knowing my sister would retaliate. The next morning when I arrived to work, my receptionist told me my supervisors had booked an urgent meeting. My stomach dropped. Of course, Camilla had made good on her threat. When I walked into the conference room, I found two supervisors and a higher-up I'd never met before. Their faces were stiff, concerned. They spoke carefully, like they were handling a fragile object. If I didn't have the recording, I might have lost everything. But I came prepared. I opened my briefcase and handed them letters from my primary care doctor, notes from my psychiatrist, confirmation of medication pickup history, all normal, a statement from my therapist, clean psychiatric evaluation spanning years. I told them calmly and professionally that certain family members had a history of using mental health as a weapon against me. They read the documents, their expressions softened. One apologized, another praised my work performance. The meeting ended in under 15 minutes. As I walked back to my office, relief washed over me so intensely I nearly cried. Camilla had tried to destroy the one thing I'd built entirely on my own and failed. I waited until I got to my car after work before calling her. I shouldn't have laughed, but I did. I told her it didn't work, that the company just missed her lies immediately, that she failed. She screamed at me until the phone crackled, calling me every slur she could think of. She said she was getting on the first plane home and would make sure I regretted everything I had ever done. Her rage didn't shock me. What scared me was how calm I felt hearing her threats, like I knew something terrible was coming. I was right. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my front door, not knocking, pounding, like someone trying to break it down. When I opened it, Camilla stood on my doorstep like a cowering man behind her. Massive, easily 6'5", shoulders like a wall, hands the size of dinner plates. I later learned his name was Victor. Behind them stood my mother. Before I could react, Victor shoved me so hard I hit the floor. Pain shot down my arm. Camilla and my mother pushed past me as if I didn't exist. The boys woke up from the noise and peeked out of a guest room, frightened. I scrambled to my feet, trying to get in between them and Victor, but Camilla barked something sharp, and Victor grabbed the boys, one under each arm, and carried them out of the house. They both screamed. I tried to pull Evan from Victor's arms, but he slammed me into the wall. My head cracked so hard against it that I saw white flashes. My mother watched all of this and said nothing, not one word to defend me or her grandchildren. Camilla spit in my face before leaving. Victor dragged the boys into a black Suburban I didn't recognize. My mother got in, Camilla got in, the car sped away with the boys inside, shoeless, their things still in my house, crying for me. The moment they disappeared, I collapsed on the floor and had an anxiety attack so strong I thought I might pass out. When I could finally breathe again, I called the police, shaking, crying, trying to remember license plate numbers, clothing, accents, details. Thank God for my job because my brain is trained to catch details most people miss. I remembered every digit on the plate. I gave the officers everything, and then I waited. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except Evan and Miles screaming for me. Hours later, the police called back. They'd found the Suburban. They'd stopped it with multiple units. Victor tried to fight the officers. 2 were punched in the head. 1 was knocked down. Another had to fire a shot that struck him in the thigh. Camilla also attacked the officer who tried to handcuff her. Both were arrested on the spot. The officer asked if I would take a call from Camilla. She was screaming for me, demanding bail money. I told him no. She could rot. The boys had been taken into CPS protection. They were safe, but they weren't with me. And losing them, after everything, felt like losing pieces of myself.
The house felt silent after the police call. Not peaceful, hollow. Every room held reminders of the boys, their new clothes stacked neatly on the dresser, their Switch consoles on the coffee table. Miles' little plush dog still propped on the pillow where he'd left it. I picked up the toy and pressed it to my chest. It smelled faintly like bubblegum shampoo. That was all it took for the tears to start again. I had only had them for a few days, but they had carved themselves into my heart so fiercely that the emptiness left behind felt unbearable. The next few days blurred together. I barely slept. I'd wake up in the middle of the night reaching for the quiet sounds of 2 little boys breathing down the hallway, and reality would crash in. They weren't here. I called CPS constantly, even though I knew they couldn't give me direct updates. The agent who answered kept saying, "They're safe, but that's all I can disclose." That phrase became both a comfort and a knife. Meanwhile, my trip to Australia was approaching. I had planned it for nearly a year, meant to meet Callum's parents, spend time with him, introduce myself properly to his world. Canceling would cost thousands, and worse, it would insult his family. But how was I supposed to focus on meeting future in-laws while Evan and Miles were somewhere unfamiliar and probably scared, wondering if I'd abandoned them too? I tried to act normal when I talked to Callum, but I didn't fool him. He could hear the edge in my voice. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said, over the video call one night. "Just come here. Let me take care of you for a while." The way he said it, soft, sincere, cut through the noise in my head. I needed the break, even if Gil gnawed at me. On the day of my flight, I sat at the airport bar with a cocktail in hand, scrolling through pictures of the boys. Evan's shy grin, Miles' toothless smile. The 3 of us posing with goofy props from the mall photo booth. I cried quietly, promising myself it would be the last time until I returned home. When I landed in Cairns, Australia, Callum ran up to me and scooped me off the ground, spinning me like we were in a movie. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. His family welcomed me immediately, warm, witty, easy to love. We spent days hiking, sightseeing, laughing. At one point, Callum took me to Crystal Falls Reserve, a hidden waterfall surrounded by lush forest. We swam in the clear water and held each other under the mist until I forgot what heartbreak felt like. It was perfect. But perfection doesn't last forever. When I returned to the U.S., the moment I stepped into my house, reality swallowed me again. The courthouse date for the criminal charges, breaking and entering, CPS investigations were ongoing, and the boys, well, still weren't with me. I went straight to the Brookhaven Police Department and pressed charges officially. I wasn't backing down, not anymore. But CPS frustrated me. Despite everything, Camilla abandoning them, kidnapping a violent stranger, attacking officers, they still hadn't declared her unfit. I wanted to scream. If I had done half of what Camilla did, CPS would have taken my kids instantly. But Camilla, she always seemed to skate on ice that somehow never cracked. That night, I sat on my couch clutching Miles' forgotten plush dog and cried harder than I had in Australia. At least overseas, I had distraction. Back home, I was drowning in reminders. I called CPS every day, every morning, every afternoon. Persistence was the only power I had. Finally, a month after Camilla's arrest, they reached a decision. CPS officially removed Evan and Miles from Camilla's custody. It didn't mean she lost them permanently, not yet. It meant she would have to fight in court to get them back. And that gave me a window. I filed to open a custody case immediately.
I hired the best attorney I could find, someone who specialized in high conflict cases. I didn't care how much it cost. I was ready to spend every dollar I had. I wasn't just fighting to keep the boys safe. I was fighting to give them the life I never had. Before the custody case began, the criminal trial against Camilla, breaking and entering, assault by proxy through Victor, was scheduled. It was the first time I'd seen her since the day she'd spit in my face in my own home. When she walked into the courtroom in County Orange, hair messy, eyes wild, she looked less like my sister and more like a stranger wearing her face. My mother sat in the back row, refusing to look at me. The trial proceeded smoothly until the judge mentioned an upcoming custody hearing. Camilla turned slowly towards me, eyes narrowing. "What?" she hissed across the room. The judge tried to continue, but Camilla exploded. She screamed my name, lunged out of her seat, and launched herself at me like an animal. She clawed at my face, ripped at my hair, and managed to sink her teeth into my forearm so deeply I felt skin tear. The bailiff tackled her and dragged her away, kicking and shrieking. The judge's face was frozen in disbelief. Blood ran down my arm. My head pounded. My entire body shook from shock. But as they dragged Camilla out, screaming what she'd do to me when she got out, I knew something important. She had just destroyed any chance of regaining custody, and she didn't even realize it. The criminal charges against Camilla stacked up higher and higher. Child endangerment, neglect, assault, resisting arrest, conspiracy, and more. Victor's violent rampage added charges by association. The process took nearly 2 full years, but eventually the verdict came. Camilla was sentenced to life. She wasn't going anywhere. My mother avoided prison only because she testified against Camilla, crying on the stand as she threw her golden child to the wolves to save herself. I sat there listening, feeling nothing, just tired. When she stepped down from the stand, I knew I never wanted to see her again. And I never have. With Camilla gone for good, the custody case intensified. Her ex, the boy's biological father, Derek Lawson, suddenly decided he wanted full custody, likely pushed by his family. The battle dragged on longer than I ever expected. Hearings, evaluations, interviews, home inspections, more hearings. But I didn't falter. I couldn't, because somewhere out there, 2 little boys were waiting for someone to come get them. Someone they trusted. Someone who hadn't given up on them. After nearly 2 years of time exhausting REM, the judge finally issued the ruling. I was granted full legal custody of Edmund and Miles. I don't remember breathing in the minutes that followed. I just remember running to my car, shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice before I got the engine on. When I arrived at the CPS office, the boys were waiting in a small room with their backpacks, their faces lit up the moment they saw me. Miles ran first, nearly tackling me with how tightly he hugged me. Evan followed, crying before he even reached my arms. I brought them home. Our home. They explored the rooms I'd prepared for them months earlier. Evan found his Switch on the dresser. Miles found his plush dog sitting neatly on his pillow. He picked it up, hugged it tight, then turned and launched himself into my arms. Evan joined the hug, burying his face into my shoulder. Through his tears, he whispered, "I knew it, Aunt Lena. I knew you'd come back for us." And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly needed me. Like I was finally building the family I had always deserved.
Life after the custody ruling didn't magically become easy. Healing never arrives in a perfect straight line. Some days I wake up expecting to hear Camilla's voice cutting into me from another room. Some nights I remember my mother's words and feel heaviness I can't name. But then I hear footsteps down the hallway, 2 sets, one lighter than the other. "Aunt Lena? Can we have pancakes?" Evan stands in the doorway with sleepy eyes and hair sticking up in every direction. Miles hides behind him, holding his plush dog by the tail. They both look at me like I'm the safest place they've ever known. And suddenly, I remember why I fought so hard. Our mornings look different now. I make breakfast while the boys argue about who gets the last blueberry. Evan weaves at the table, telling me new facts he learns at school. Miles chats nonstop about superheroes. And when they leave for class, they both hug me before running to the bus. I don't think they hugged many people before. At night, I help with homework, listen to stories about their day, and tuck them into beds covered in blankets they picked out themselves. Evan likes brew, Miles likes anything with dogs on it. Sometimes I catch them staring at the bedroom door just to make sure I'm still there. And I always am. Every therapy session they attend, every school event, every soccer practice, I'm there. And slowly, they've grown into kids who laugh easily, who trust the world a little more, who know they matter. In the quiet moments, when the house is finally still, I sit on the couch and breathe in the peace I never had in my own childhood. I think about how love can grow in places where love never existed before. Callum visits often now. He and the boys bond fast. They climb on him like he's their personal jungle gym, and he pretends not to fall even though they're giggling and trying their hardest to knock him over. When they ask him to read bedtime stories, he uses silly accents until all three of them collapse laughing. Some nights after the boys fall asleep, Callum sits beside me and says softly, "You saved them, you know." But I shake my head, because the truth is they saved me too. Evan and Miles gave me something my own family never could. Purpose without pain, love without conditions, a home that didn't feel haunted. I don't know what the future will look like. Maybe one day Callum and I will build a life under one roof. Maybe the boys will grow up remembering these years as the time their world finally started making sense. What I do know is this: I chose them, and they chose me back. And in the quiet glow of our new life together, with soft laughter drifting from the bedrooms and the scent of dinner lingering in the air, I finally understand something I never did as a child. Family isn't the blood that bruised you. Family is the love that stayed.